tonight is a great step in that direction. We appreciate you guys being here. We're trying to tape it, so those parents who couldn't be here tonight and students who couldn't be here tonight because there are a lot of sports and things going on will have an opportunity to hear the information. And I'm sure that everyone saw Judi's bio on our website and on the invitations, but wow. A founding faculty member for 2 private schools in Boca Raton, has been a featured speaker at national educational conferences, wrote the College Board's first SAT prep software and test-taking strategy chapters of the original SAT prep books. So we're definitely honored to have someone speak to us who really knows what it's all about, taking these tests and getting into college. Specifically talking tonight about what it takes to get into Florida's universities. So, and hopefully we'll have a lot of students in those. So Judi, thank you so much for being here with your family as well. And I'll leave it to you.
Thank you for having me. Let me do a couple of introductions first. My husband Alan, who's sort of, if it weren't for his support, I wouldn't be doing what I am, because he retired years ago and I will never retire. And my son Jason, who's our COO, who basically oversees all of my learning centers and schools. You may have heard the score at the top, which are learning centers that I founded here in South Florida, and they're in Palm Beach County as well as Broward County, where we do a lot of tutoring and test prep, and that's where I do my educational consulting. I'm one of the few certified educational planners in the state of Florida. There's, I think, around 300 or 400 of us across the country, which basically means that I'm, an independent college counselor. In many instances, I work hand in hand with counseling staff at various high schools to help their college counseling program, and in other instances, I'm working privately with students, individually. We actually do college counseling, college application boot camps every summer. We have been doing them at Boca Raton Community High School for the past, I want to say 10 or 11 summers, and we've done them the past couple of years at Suncoast, and we'll be repeating them again this summer. And of course, it's another option that may be open to you. It's a pretty low-cost option, and the schools we often work with the schools for kids who are on free and reduced lunch as well. So what I'd like to talk to you about this evening is Florida State University system and what it has taken this past year to get in, and a little bit about a change that may be, that looks like it's coming down the pike for the revised, ACT and the new SAT as they relate to the state universities. So this is a map of the state of Florida. We actually now have 12 state universities. It was 11 until about a year and a half or so ago, and we're now up to 12. Tallahassee, our capital, is the only city that actually has 2 state universities. It has both Florida State and FAMU, Florida A&M, one of the top historically black universities in this country. And what I'd like to do is first give you a slight overview of the 12 state universities. I've got them all here by abbreviation. I'll just quickly read the names for those of you, or give you the names for those of you who may not be familiar with all the abbreviations. So Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University, Florida Atlantic University, Florida Gulf Coast, Florida International, our newest one, Florida Polytech, Florida State, New College, which is the Honors College of Florida, which is over on the West Coast, University of Central Florida, University of Florida, University of North Florida, South Florida, and the one that's forgotten because it's in Alabama, well, practically in Alabama, is University of West Florida. It is the only one that is on, that's not on East Coast time, actually. So just in terms of size, I think it's pretty wonderful that we have such a wide range. Going from a low of just over 500 at our newest Florida Poly and New College at just over 800 to UCF, which is the second largest residential state university in the country, and obviously the largest one here in Florida. Also, I'd like to give you an idea about diversity on our college campuses, that there's quite a range. two highest being FAMU and Florida International. Florida International is about 2/3 Hispanic. The rest of them sort of fall middle ranges. And then finally, in terms of the admitted students, the first time in college students, and sometimes you'll hear the schools, the universities talking about FTIC, first time in college. Typically, it's a high school senior who has just gotten in as a freshman. But the percentage who have been admitted, who are in the top 20% of the class, although both FAU and UF cheated a little bit and gave the top 25%. And by the way, many of the statistics you'll get tonight are actually here. I have a few handouts, but there's a two-sided handout that has, on one side of it has the statistics that you'll be getting tonight on all the state universities. So you don't have to take notes on that part because all of it is here. You don't have one? Here you go. Shameless advertising on the other side. So in order to be considered for admission to one of Florida's four-year state universities, students have to meet some minimum eligibility requirements. This does not mean that they will be admitted, but basically that GPA, the way the university is calculated, not necessarily the way that it is calculated on the transcript, and they're very different. If that student has a 3.0 or better GPA, any SAT or ACT score makes that student eligible. But a student who has a lower GPA, going down to a 2.5, needs to meet minimum requirements for SAT and ACT. Does not include the essay, just the basics. And these are the old numbers for the SAT. We don't know how those new numbers will shake down, because the new numbers, there's no more separate reading and writing main score. There are some sub-scores, but there's a combined reading and writing score, evidence-based reading and writing, so we don't know how that's going to shake down yet in the future. There's also core curriculum requirements in terms of the number of years of a particular subject area that a student must have. This is a little bit higher than what is required for graduation. For example, to graduate from a public high school in Florida, a student does not need 2 years of foreign language. But in order to get into a state university in Florida, that student does need the 2 years of foreign languages. So one language for 2 years if they don't have to be consecutive.
It can't be one French, one Spanish.
You cannot do 1 year of French and 1 year of Spanish. That doesn't work. And in terms of just an overview of admission requirements for not only all of our state universities, but pretty much every university in the country, with the exception that those that might be, like say a music conservatory or performing arts school, or a school where it's an art university, academic record becomes the most important factor, and it's not just the GPA, it's an actual evaluation of the courses a student has taken and the level of challenge. SAT and ACT scores, except for those colleges that have a testing optional policy. And I'd like to give you a website. This is not in any of my handouts. There is a wonderful website that monitors all the schools' policies for SAT and ACT, and has a list of over 800 universities that have become test optional or test flexible. And there's many variations of that, but it's just called Fair Test. That's FAIRTEST.org. And if you look at that list of 800 universities, you will probably recognize about 30 of them. The overwhelming majority of them are schools that are pretty much open enrollment, that accept 98% of the students who apply, or they may be things like the Eastern Tennessee State for Women of the Bible, or the Baltimore, Maryland Yeshiva for Orthodox Jewish boys, or something like that. But you will absolutely recognize 30 to 40 names. Some pretty powerhouse universities, like this year George Washington University went test optional. Beware of test optional, because sometimes you still have to submit test scores if you're looking for financial aid, scholarships, recruited athlete. And it's actually to the university's advantage. It ultimately improves their rank in U.S. News and World Report when they go test optional, and that drives more applications in the future. And that's basically because more kids are going to wind up applying, kids who may not have the scores. And also, the kids who submit scores have higher scores, because if they have low scores, they won't submit them. So the average SAT or ACT score goes up. So when you drive up the number of applicants and you drive up the average SAT, the rank goes up, makes the school more desirable, which generates even more applications for the future, and which makes them look even more selective. So it's pretty much self-serving. And then finally, the other piece of information, which you can't really quantify in terms of numbers as you can the other things that I mentioned, would be what many colleges call the holistic information. So that's going to be things like students' essay, details about the extracurricular commitment, letters of recommendation, and very few of our state universities even will accept recommendations. You'll see a list of who will and who won't. But it's sort of, who is this kid beyond, what are her grades and her test scores. So 11 of our 12 state universities recalculate the GPA. They don't use what's on the transcript. However, University of West Florida, maybe because they still don't know that they're in Florida, does take the district GPA off the transcript. That's the weighted, that's the higher of the two GPAs that's on a student's transcript. And the reason there are 3 of the state universities there in red is because, when you apply to college, typically you send an official transcript from your high school. Well, those 3 state universities do not require an official transcript, at least not at the time of application. They instead have something called the SSAR, the Student Self-Reported Academic Record, in which case the student is actually sitting down just once, because it applies to all 3 universities, and actually has to enter every single course and grade that was a high school course, even if taken in middle school. It also includes courses that will be taken first and second semester senior year. If that student is accepted to a university that depends upon the SSAR, then a student will send an official transcript upon graduation and commitment to that university, depositing that the student is going to come. So that the university now is really only reviewing transcripts for those students who will be enrolling. It's saving them a significant amount of work, and all the data is, the GPA is calculated on computer, and I'm going to show you how that's calculated. It started out with just, let me think about this, University of Florida, I think did it first, then FSU added the SSAR this past year, Florida Poly added it, other universities are likely to be adding it. It mimics what goes on, for example, at the University of California system. There's 9 universities there, like UCLA and Berkeley and Santa Barbara. They work the same way. They don't call it an SSAR, they call it an A to G matrix, but it's the same concept. Okay, so how is that GPA recalculated? First of all, only the core academic courses count. So things like health, PE, drama, journalism, I don't know, what else can I think of? Driver ed, those things don't count. And unfortunately for a lot of kids, that's where they have their higher grades. So you have to throw away all these non-substantive courses and only count the semester grades, not quarter grades, not exam grades, for English, math, science, social science, which is like, your history, government, economics, psychology, things like that, and foreign language. Any course that is IB, AP, ACE, do you have ACE courses here?
Yes.
Okay. No matter what they're in, will count. So for instance, I think there's an ACE course in tourism. Likely to count. It won't count necessarily as much as AP Calculus, but it will count. Dual enrollment courses count. But I will tell you that University of Florida, if you call and ask, gee, should I take dual enrollment physics or should I take AP physics? Because it will impact your school calculated GPA and your rank exactly the same way. There's definitely a preference at University of Florida for taking an AP course as opposed to dual enrollment. So let me just address dual enrollment for a moment. In terms of the calculation, whether it's a school calculation or a university calculation, it works the same way in terms of the extra points that you get. But more and more colleges are becoming leery of the kids who are saying, you know, we have the AP physics teacher from hell here. I'm just going to go take dual enrollment physics because it will count the same way. Forget it. Especially if you're applying to a much more selective university, they would much rather see the AP. There is a time to do dual enrollment, however. For instance, a student who has finished both years of AP Calculus, who still has another year of high school and loves math, would go on perhaps to take differential equations or linear algebra or something like that as a dual enrollment course. Or the student who has already taken AP Bio and is really enjoying it might take a dual enrollment course in microbiology, for example. Or if there's a conflict that AP French and AP Gov are given at exactly the same time, yes, taking one of them dual enrollment would be fine. So there is a time and place for dual enrollment, but AP has become, you know, AP, and when I say AP, please understand AP, IB, and ACE. ACE has not gained as much popularity yet in the highly selective universities. In fact, I think that this year was the very first year that Common App, which is an application accepted by over 500 universities, actually included ACE in terms of, you know, describing senior year courses. So most colleges will look at ACE as being almost equivalent to AP and IB, and will very much look at AP and IB pretty much the same way. Higher level AP course being a little tougher than an AP, standard level being, you know, marginally, I can't say easier, let's say less tough, but pretty much the same. So these are the only courses that will count in terms of the GPA calculation. And the A is, you know, converted to a 4 and the B to a 3, etc. The points are added up, and by the way, for those courses like, let's say, Algebra 1 or Algebra 2, where a grade, or Geometry, I guess, where a grade isn't given for first semester, it's given for year end because of the, you know, the end of course exam. You basically double that course. So if I got a B in my, you know, honors Algebra 1 course, I would give myself 2 Bs, one for each semester. So universities don't see quarter grades, don't see exam grades, except for a transcript that might be sent after first quarter senior year. Okay. The weight that's being added is very different than the district uses, in fact, than the state of Florida uses in terms of, you know, rigorous courses. So for example, if I'm here taking AP English language and I get an A, in terms of the way my district GPA is calculated, I get 4 points for that A, and I get 2 additional points for AP. That doesn't work the same way when I'm looking at state universities. You get 1 point, no matter what the grade is, A, B, or C only, at 1 point for an AP, IB, ACE, or dual enrollment, and a half a point for an honors. So that the GPA that is calculated by the universities is honestly always going to be lower than what you see on the transcript. So in order to determine if you're a good fit, at least number-wise, for a particular state university or any university that publishes a GPA range, a mid-50% range, you really want to be calculating a GPA the same way the university does. Most selective universities recalculate GPA or calculate some form of index, but there are a few that do take it directly from the transcript. Okay, so I've added up all my grades, my 4s, 3s, hopefully not too many of the other numbers. I've added up the number, you know, the 1s and the 1/2s for, say, AP and honors. And then I'm just dividing by the number of courses that I used. And again, it's on a per semester basis when I'm looking at a public high school. Okay. That number is actually the GPA that 11 out of the 12 state universities will use. Okay, and again, lower than what's on the transcript. The more selective that state university is, or again, any university, it applies across the board, the more they want to see AP courses, or IB courses, or ACE courses. So forget IB for a moment, because IB, it's, you know, junior year, senior year is all IB. The first 2 years, pretty much, most of them are pre-IB. But the kids who have more selections, AP courses, ACE courses, I'd say it's really hard to get into University of Florida if you don't have, let's say, 3 APs your senior year, or ACE, 2 junior year, maybe 3, 2 sophomore year. FSU is getting to be the same way. University of South Florida is getting to be that way. University of Central Florida is getting to be that way. There's definitely an emphasis on rigor for those of our state universities that are more selective. And if I'm looking beyond our state universities, if the school is pretty selective, let's say an Emory or a Vanderbilt or a Washington University in St. Louis, or a Williams or an Amherst or Harvard or Yale or Princeton, you might need 8, 10, 11 AP courses. Again, the IB kids don't have to worry about it because they'll have at least 10 of them by the time they graduate IB, and that's treated the same. Okay, so what did it actually take to get it? These are the mid 50% numbers reported by the universities based on the way it is recalculated, and again, other than University of West Florida, because they do use the GPA, the district GPA on the transcript. And it's really nice to see the range that's in there, because you can see that some of them have pretty high numbers. And then there are some that obviously significantly easier to get into. So again, I think we're pretty lucky here in Florida that we have 12 universities that have this amazing range of numbers for GPA. Let's look at test scores. And this is based on the old SAT of 2400. We have no idea what the numbers are going to be for the new SAT, because even College Board does not know how the new SAT equates to the old SAT. I think wherever you see high SATs, you're going to see high ACTs. You don't have to submit both. It's one or the other. In fact, for virtually every university in the country, you either submit SAT or ACT. But what you do need to know, and this would apply if you're looking at a highly selective university, not a state university in Florida. SAT and ACTs are on the transcript for any public high school in Palm Beach County. And the Board of Education the district office will take off scores that you are legitimately not sending to colleges. So for instance, if I've taken the SAT and ACT each a number of times, and my best SAT is much better than my best ACT, I actually can have legitimately all of my ACT scores removed from my transcript. And actually, here's a new one. ACT will allow you to cancel a test score and remove it from your record at any time. Months and months and months after you've taken a test. They won't tell you how long it takes, but they will do it. College Board will only take something off your record within 3 business days of taking that test. Which means the student has to walk out and say, my timing was off, the kid in front of me was sneezing, the proctor was too distracting, I know I didn't do well, before the student even knows the score. So if you're applying to a very, very highly selective school, you may want to, think about taking scores off the transcript. It has to be done in writing, and it's done through the district office. This is an overall acceptance rate in terms of the state universities. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail, but you can see that some of them are much easier to get into, or at least admit more than 50%. And then you have some that are, more and more selective with lower numbers. But nothing in there that looks like, oh, we only admit 20 or 30%, of the students.
Is that in your handouts?
All of this is in the handout, I swear to you. SAT, GPA, acceptance rate, it's all here.
So what's that percentage based on?
Pardon me?
Acceptance rate, is that based on all applications?
That was based on all applications for freshman class, and summer and fall combined. So it's a weighted average. It's possible that this may change the super scoring of SAT and ACT. Anybody need definition of super score? Okay, so super score. I took the ACT 3 times, and my first time I had a wonderful math and science score, not so great reading and English. The second time I had a really great reading score, not so great everything else, and the last time I had a fabulous essay score and reading score, whatever. So a college can cherry pick the best scores from each. That doesn't mean that you can send a partial score report. So in other words, let me take something easier. SAT, new SAT has a reading and writing score and has a math score. That doesn't mean I can submit the reading and writing score from the test in March and the math score from the test in May. I'd have to submit both scores, and the college might super score it. Virtually every college in the country will super score the SAT. Not all of them super score the ACT. And you can see from our 12 state universities, both UCF and University of Florida are the only 2 that do not super score the ACT. ACT specifically says it's a test that's not meant to be super scored, it's meant to be at one cohesive unit. Whether or not they require recommendations, you can see most of them say no. Where FAMU says below, it's basically saying if the student is below our minimum numbers, we'd like to see a recommendation. But University of Florida and Florida State will throw away recommendations if you send them, because otherwise they'd be penalizing kids who follow the rules. But when you start applying to pretty selective schools, some out-of-state state universities, private universities, many of them require 1 or 2 teacher recommendations and a school recommendation, which typically comes from the guidance counselor or another administrator who really knows the student well. These were the deadlines from this year. They don't change much from year to year. However, people are conjecturing right now that deadlines might become earlier across the board next year or the year after, and that's because the federal government has made a change in the way financial aid is, financial aid forms are filed. Through this year, parents had to file, if they were looking for need-based aid, on or after January 1st of the senior year. The form was not even available before January 1st online. Starting next year, you'll be filing for financial aid in October. And instead of using your previous year's tax return, you will use what's called the prior year. It's like 2 years back. So with an earlier submission of financial aid forms, there is conjecture that deadlines for applying to college may come earlier. We don't know yet. The earliest deadlines really have been these. University of Florida, November 1st, single deadline. If you don't get your stuff in by November 1st, you're cooked. It's almost impossible to get in. FSU has 2 deadlines. One of them traditionally is October 15th, the other one is a few months later. It is much, much, much harder to get in later. You really want to get things in by October 15th, and no college is allowed right now to have a deadline before October 15th. There's a national organization called NACAC, National Association for College Admission Counseling, and they have dictated the rules and basically say nobody can have a deadline before October 15th, but again, that might change. The other thing to know is that so many of our state universities have what's called rolling admission. First in, first out. The minute you get all your stuff in, they start reviewing you and they start making decisions. They don't wait until a certain date to let you know. So UCF is a prime example of that. Kids can apply as early as August, and they'll have their decisions probably by early November. Whereas if I applied to the University of Florida, the decisions only came out 2 weeks ago. So, and this is true for any college that offers rolling admission. So for those of you who have juniors, you want to make sure that this summer they are working on applications as soon as the applications come out, and that they start working on their essays as soon as the essay questions come out. And essay questions often come out before the actual application. Sometimes applications don't come out until August, Okay, honors programs. Honors programs typically cover the first 2 years of a state university, and not all courses. It's typically 2 courses per semester for the first 2 years. These courses tend to be significantly smaller. So instead of having, let's say, 200 kids in my Intro to Psych course, if my Intro to Psych course is honors, I might only have 35 kids in there. I most likely have much better housing as well. I might have priority registration, which means I might not have to take 8 o'clock classes. And I can get the professors I really want. So in some cases, there are absolute cutoffs for honors programs, and in other cases, it's a range of numbers, and so there's some flexibility. And finally, last thing in terms of statistics, then I'll answer a question. These are the most popular majors at our 12 state universities, and I've just highlighted those that occur most frequently. And I think it's not surprising to see things like, psychology, business, anything that is sort of biology / pre-med related. And I think I saw a question over here.
I just wanted to ask, you said in junior year that they should work on their, in the junior year in the summer, they should work on their essay, and what else?
Okay, so the summer after junior year is when students are working on their applications. So for example, a student who's using Common App comes out in the middle of the summer. Well, actually, last few years it came out August 1st. They're talking about having it come out earlier this next year. Actually, here's something brand new. Okay, so Common App is used by all 8 Ivy League universities. Many of our private colleges here in Florida, University of Miami, Rollins, Stetson, University of Tampa. I've named a bunch of universities before. I mentioned things like, Boston University, Emory, Vanderbilt. These are all on Common App. There are some state universities on Common App as well, like University of Colorado, University of Virginia, University of North Carolina. The only one of our state universities that's on Common App is New College. Anyone who's currently a junior can actually start Common App right now. Not the essays, but sort of all the other base data, like where do you go to high school, how big is your graduating class, who's your guidance counselor, what's your address, where did your parents go to college, and that data, this is the very first time, will roll over into next year. And for our state universities, those applications are not going to come out until sometime in the summer. They may or may not let you know their essay questions in advance. In recent years, UF and FSU have changed their essay questions pretty frequently, so we don't know what's coming down the pike for this coming year. But you really want your kids to be done with as much of the college application process by the time they go back to school in mid-August. Okay. So I've mentioned this already about the SSAR for 3 of our state universities. A new SAT policy, and there's a lot of conflict about this. There's a document that came out from the Board of Governors in Florida, which oversees all of our state universities, and it specifically said that beginning with the spring of 2000, the kids applying for entry for spring of 2017 or later, that the SAT and ACT optional essays were not needed. So all this, I started telling all of, our test prep students, all of my college counseling students, all the high school counselors who I know, that this had happened. However, College Board on its website says something a little bit different about some of the state universities in Florida. So I had my assistant call all the state universities in Florida to see what their policies are. And these are the ones that have responded so far. Some of them, like UCF, say, we don't know yet what we're doing. But you can see the policies are different for different schools. Like UF, you would think UF would want it. UF does not want the essay. But FSU, let's see, I think FSU does. But if a student takes the SAT multiple times, the student only needs to do the essay once. The others just, haven't made up their minds yet, or the person we spoke to on the phone couldn't tell us, and we'll keep calling. So I'm going to go into just a little bit of detail about not all 12 of our state universities, but about the ones that are the most popular. You probably know, or hopefully you will now, that when you apply to one of the state universities in Florida, or any of them, almost any of them, you can apply for summer or fall. And historically, it has been easier to get in for summer. This was the first year where the statistics for admission to University of Florida for summer and fall were exactly the same. It was no easier to get in for summer. Okay. And by the way, you can apply for fall and be admitted to summer. You can apply for fall and be admitted, ready for this, to spring, to second semester. And because basically they're saying you're not quite strong enough to get in like everyone else in the fall, but we know we're going to have kids who flunk out or transfer right after one semester. We'll have empty beds second semester. A university is a business. They've got to fill those empty beds, so they can put some kids on hold for second semester and say, go work first semester. Take a couple courses at Palm Beach State, travel, get a job, anything, and come second semester. So don't be surprised if you apply for fall to any university and get admitted for spring. It's pretty much only our state universities, though, in Florida that gives you the choice of applying for fall or applying for summer. Okay, so those are the admission stats, the admission rates. This is data that University of Florida has taken off their website. And I'm not sure why they've taken it off, and every time I ask I don't get an answer, but I want to show you, this is really important. Look at the fact that almost 85% of the kids who have a 4.0 GPA or better, the way UF calculates it, and this is from a few years ago, so the numbers were a little lower then, but only 85% of those kids got in. There were 15% of kids whose GPA was a 4.0 or better who did not get in. So you have to ask yourself why. Okay? Well, they probably had crummy test scores, or they did a horrible job on the holistic part of the application, on the 2 essays that are required, and on the detailed resume information that they ask about extracurricular activities. And they do ask for quite a bit of detail. And you can also see that if a student who had just barely a B+ average, almost none of them got in. Maybe those are some of the recruited athletes, some of the special cases that are flagged. It's not just a recruited athlete. It might be someone who's buying the library, or there may be some other extenuating circumstances that the university is looking for certain kinds of kids. Strength of schedule. If you look at the number of core courses, kids with more core courses have a higher likelihood of getting in. So for example, a student who says, listen, I've already had 3 years of Spanish, Mom, don't make me take another year, I hate Spanish. That's fine, you can drop it. You can drop it after 2 years even, but you better replace it with another core academic subject. Don't just take a study hall, just take an extra drama class.
So that's per semester. That's,
yes. Yeah. Okay. And then finally, looking at the SAT scores, notice that roughly 12% of those kids with really high SAT scores did not get in. Okay, again, they probably either had not such a hot transcript, like this is the kid who's lazy in school, gets B's and C's, but really, really smart, so rocks the SAT, not getting in. Or again, did a lousy job on the holistic information. So UF is super serious, as are all of our state universities, about that holistic information. UF introduced something new a few years ago called Innovation Academy. The application specifically asks, it's the main UF application, has a checkbox to say, shall we consider you for Innovation Academy? That's like going to a small private school within the University of Florida, except that you're not there for fall semester and spring semester. You're there for spring semester and summer. They have things that you can get involved in the fall, but you're not a full-time student in the fall. And by the way, Florida Bright Futures will cover you for Innovation Academy, but I believe that Florida Bright Futures doesn't cover you for your first summer at any of our state universities, because it's supposed to cover 4 full years, so it may not cover that first summer. But don't quote me on that one.
No, you're right.
Am I right?
You're right.
Okay. When Innovation Academy started, there were fewer than 200 students who got in, but these are kids who are looking for classes like no bigger than this, and are really interested in initiating and starting new things and being very entrepreneurial, not necessarily in business. And in fact, these are the majors. There's a limited number of majors that are available for Innovation Academy, and this is on the UF website. But the interesting thing is that every one of these majors has exactly the same focus, same minor, let me say, and that's basically a minor in innovation. These kids have amazing opportunities for internships, for research. It's for the kid who thinks a little bit differently. Remember, they're not there for football season. Okay, they may be doing a study abroad, they may be doing research, they may be working, they may not even be up in Gainesville. Admission stats, a tighter range for the SAT, ACT, but slightly lower GPA. So it looks like it's a little bit easier to get into Innovation Academy. And as of last year, there were 300 kids enrolled in it. So very small, very, very cool program. UF introduced a brand new program about a year or 2 ago, where it's an undergraduate program that is completely online. This is great for the kid either who can't afford to go away from home, or who needs to be home to maybe to take care of a sick sibling, or who needs to be home and work and help pay for things. So this is a complete online program, and I believe it's a separate application with only select majors. This is also relatively new, the PACE program. In fact, I had one of my students who was accepted to PACE, and she had no idea what that meant because it wasn't very explicit when her information was given to her. But basically, it starts off as an online program, and once you have completed, I believe it's 60 credit hours, you can now come to campus and live on campus and finish up your last 2 years there. And again, it helps, it's for kids who are almost but not quite there. It's going to fill beds when you come up. And when I say fill beds, I don't mean you're necessarily living in a residence hall. I mean, you're bringing in more income to the university. So this is for the kid who almost meets the admission requirements, but is not strong enough to get in for summer and is not strong enough to get in for spring. Okay, so UF application has 2 essays, one of which changes pretty regularly. They are asking for resume details. They're not asking for a list of your activities. And it's not just the activities in school. It's church, it's synagogue, it's summer, it's personal, it's hobbies. They want to know who these kids are. And so if this is a student who, let's say, is on the debate team, they want to know, like, what tournaments have you placed in? If this is a student who is on the school newspaper, they'll want to know what positions have you held, what have been your responsibilities, do you write regular articles? They specifically are looking for information on community service. And like all other universities, they are not looking to say, oh, I did this walkathon, I did this beach cleanup, I called bingo at this old age home. They are looking for sustained commitment to fewer things, even one community service project, but that is sustained. So it could be almost anything. It could be, for instance, I just had a student the other day who loves art history, loves art, doesn't have very much community service, and I suggested that she go to the local Boys and Girls Club and see if she could start an art appreciation and a studio art program for underprivileged kids, and they let her. So she is showing that she takes it, and she's only a sophomore, so she's gonna have it sophomore year, junior year, and senior year. It shows she's taking initiative. It shows she's dedicated to something, passionate about it, and as her program gains in popularity, she will either spread it to other boys and girls clubs, or she will get more and more kids involved to go there and be mentors to these underprivileged kids. That's the type of thing, by the way, that they're looking for, not necessarily at our state universities, but I'd say when you start looking at highly selective universities, they're not looking for joiners, they're looking for leaders. And actually UF is and FSU are very much looking for leaders, so they like to see someone who has perhaps a leadership role in a club, for example. Or someone who, if you've got younger kids who haven't yet started high school, think about this. 8th grade, they need to start politicking for running for, class officer. 9th grade, it's a popularity contest, but there's a lot of responsibility that comes to being, in a leadership role at your high school. So, but it could be your church youth group. Okay, so it doesn't have to be school. And by the way, for students who, let's say, have to work after school or have to, take care of a relative or something after school, there's places for that on, the University of Florida application, even the FSU application, UCF, and I think you're going to start seeing more and more of that on Common App, as well. And they know that there are kids who just, can't do it all because they have other commitments. None of these colleges across the board are looking for kids who have a plethora of extracurricular activities. They are looking for just a few activities. So it's not about, don't join 7 clubs and pay your dues and do nothing. Join 1 club or 2 clubs and become actively involved and make a difference. We talked about the deadlines when when admission decisions came out. FSU up next, and there you're going to see a difference between the students who are admitted for summer and the students who are admitted for fall. And FSU also has its own minimum eligibility requirements. And again, it doesn't mean you're going to get in if you meet them. It just means you'll be considered. So FSU is marginally easier to get into, marginally less difficult to get into than University of Florida. And usually I find that the kids are, they're either Gators or Seminoles, but some of them apply to both. They also have some minimum eligibility requirements in terms of curriculum, but don't take a picture yet, because what you need to see is this is what's required. But the average kid who gets into Florida State looks like this. So for example, it's not 4 years of math that student has. On average, it's 5.5. So what does that mean? A student has had Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, pre-calc, and some of them have 1 year of calculus and 1 year of statistics. Some have 2 years of calculus. That's their average kid who's getting in. And in fact, your students really need to take a math course senior year if they want to go to any selective university. So you'll see the same thing in natural science. These kids are taking a science every single year. They're not saying, well, I met my graduation requirements of 3 sciences. I've taken 4 or 5, which is why we have, a funny looking average of 4.5. Foreign language, again. So this is the typical FSU kid. And imagine that UF is a little stronger than this.
But if they would have done 4 years of foreign language and not done all math for 4 years.
Yeah, you could play around with it. Yeah, you can play around with it, but I would say you must have math senior year. And you will have plenty of kids who say, listen, I hate math, and it's very hard to get into a selective university without math your senior year. Now, it could be statistics. Some kids find statistics easier, it's more practical, and there actually is statistics on the SAT, much more so than there was before, and it's also on the ACT.
Can I ask what,
But,
I think
yeah.
this is probably a really dumb question, but so these kids are taking, the typical admit is 5.5 years of math, so they're doubling up math plus another half. So
They may be.
they're taking it somewhere else, maybe a
Yes,
summer
so let
class.
me explain that. Okay. So first of all, some of your kids don't come in taking Algebra 1 as freshmen, right? Don't some of your kids take Algebra 1, maybe even geometry, while they're in middle school? Okay, so those count.
Oh,
Okay, so those count.
All right.
But
I didn't think that.
okay, but But yet kids sometimes do double up in math. So for instance, my own son took Algebra 2 and Geometry at the same time in order to be able to fit in AP Calculus. There's also a requirement to do an online course one online semester course in order to graduate from public high school in Florida. Often the kids will do PE, but I have to tell you, online PE is much harder than in school PE. So there are plenty of kids who will take extra courses through FLVS. They can do them in the summer, they can do them during the school year. Because my schools, all of my learning centers are accredited by SACS and Advanced Ed, which is the same as the school is accredited here. We give courses for credit, and because of our accreditation, all the public schools accept them. And so we'll do a small group of kids. Let's say there's a bunch of kids who want to try AP Environmental Science or AP Psych, or we'll do it one-on-one. There's a lot of online providers in addition to FLVS that offer online, AP courses, for example. You can't really find them. You can't find them for IB, and even we're not approved for IB. And I'm not sure yet about ACE because I haven't really ever looked into that. But the kids who are getting into the more selective universities are absolutely taking extra courses. You'll also find, and I'm just telling you about this, it doesn't mean I support it. You're going to find kids who are at the very top of the class who are competing for class rank. It's an ego thing with a lot of kids. And so what do they do to get their rank up? They take extra courses. They do dual enrollment courses. They do, AP courses through FLVS because they know they're going to get wonderful bumps. Okay, you have to do it at the AP, level or the dual enrollment level. So that happens a lot. I mean, personally, I don't think these kids have enough time to be kids. I think it's more important to be a happy, healthy, well-adjusted, teenager. I don't have to go to UF or FSU, right? I can go to the University of West Florida, and I could be a superstar there. And sometimes you really have to think of it in those terms, especially if you want to go on to something like, let's say, med school. I'm going to need to be 3.7, 3.8 GPA in college and take all these really tough science courses if I want to go to med school. So I better go to an undergraduate university where I know I can excel. So sometimes that means I'm not going into the one that's the most prestigious. I'm going into one that's a little bit easier because I think I'm going to stand out more. Okay, so moving all along, told you about the deadlines for FSU. We don't expect that to change. Apply early. Don't you dare send recommendations. Holistic information, they do it differently than the University of Florida. They actually ask you, well, it's optional, but anything optional means required, to upload up to a 2-page resume. And your resume, you're not filling it up by saying I've had all of these AP courses, or I'm in the IB program at Atlantic High School, or I'm an IB diploma candidate, or I'm an AP capstone candidate. You're actually going to have nitty-gritty detail about your extracurricular activities, which, by the way, can include work, summer activities. But think about your own, let's say, work resumes. And what you have down is, bulleted items to highlight what your accomplishments have been, what has made you stand out, what will make someone else want to hire you. That's what they're looking for in terms of an extracurricular resume. FSU started something brand new. They will actually pay up to $5,000 for a student to do a gap year, which is a year of enrichment in between high school and college. And you could be traveling, you could be doing community service. You're not just traveling for the sake of traveling. You're traveling doing community service or language immersion, but it's brand new. And it's a really neat option, especially for a student who might need a little bit more time to mature. They also have a special first-year abroad program, which helps them fill beds when these kids come back. You can go study abroad as a freshman. And there's something that you check off on the application to say whether you're going to be in, where is it, Florence, Panama City, London, Valencia, Spain. Okay, University of Central Florida, also known as under construction forever. A little bit easier to get into. Remember, it's the largest state university in Florida. Again, easier to get in the summer than it is in the fall. I can get it with a little bit, little fewer, AP courses, for example. Their application is set up very similar to University of Florida's. The holistic information is set up exactly the same way, except students can enter an unlimited amount of data. University of Florida, they're restricted to 950 characters in each of 4 or 5 areas. There are 2 essay questions for UCF. They say they're optional, although it doesn't say that on the application, but trust me, they're not optional. However, students can actually answer one of the 2 questions, a longer essay, or they can write about anything that they feel describes who they are. Because if you do call UCF, they will tell you that their essay questions are just guidelines. And of course, the goal is to try to write as few essays as possible. Find a way to overlap your essays. Make sure that it might, could answer more than one question from different colleges. They have a brand new program, their top 10 nights. Any student who is in the 10% of her graduating class, and it was a minimum ACT of 21. We're not sure what the new minimum SAT will be. And who applies, I believe, is by the end of the year? No, January 15th, they changed it. They made it 2 weeks later. Is guaranteed admission to UCF. It's really pretty cool. But of course, think about it. To be in the top 10% of the class, you probably need to have a lot of AP or ACE courses or be in the IB. You need to have primarily, A's and B's. But it's really nice to know that, it's automatic admission. They have a really neat double degree med program. These are becoming more and more popular. A number of our state universities have adopted them. They're generally programs that require 8 or 7 years, but you get your undergraduate degree and you don't have to apply to med school. You're just sort of going right through. If it's a 7-year program, instead of doing your senior year in your university, you're doing a freshman year at their med school. These are highly, highly selective. It is as hard to get into a double degree med program as it is to get into, let's say, Harvard, because of the low percentage that they admit. But if you've got a student who you know is really interested in medicine, it's a wonderful alternative. So UCF has a program like that. USF, FAU, they're pretty neat. And as we move on to FAU, years ago we used to call it find another university, but that's not true anymore. FAU has become so competitive, and that campus has become so much more residential and more teenage friendly, with its football stadium. I mean, it's a pretty amazing place. These numbers are going to change pretty radically because of something new that they've done. Let's see, I hope I have it in the slides. Yeah. So there are new minimum GPA requirements at FAU. This is brand new. So you can see that, if you're applying for summer or fall, you need to have either 3.4 or 3.6 respectively, the way they calculate it. And honestly, they turn kids down who are just below those numbers. And also, you can't apply for spring, but you can be accepted for it. So they also have one of these selective double degree med programs. And by the way, some of these double degree med programs have additional testing requirements like SAT subject tests, additional essay requirements, and recommendation requirements. This sort of reminds me of the Starship Enterprise. I mean, I'm a Trekkie, so but this is Florida Polytech's main building. It's called ISC, Innovation, Science, and Technology. And it's huge, and it has everything in it, just like the Starship Enterprise. I mean, it's got eating facilities, research facilities, library, residential facilities, classroom facilities. It's not the only building now, but it's the main building. It is an amazing place for someone interested in computer science or engineering in a smaller environment, and amazingly innovative. They do not do summer admission, they only do fall admission. So I'm going to take you inside and show you what it looks like. So it's definitely our newest. Hands-on learning. Look how small the classes are. That's a classroom. You know, it's not like I'm in a UF where my classes are so large that they meet online, or the slightly smaller ones have only 400 kids in them. By the way, you know, freshman math and English courses tend to be much smaller at a university. Even large state universities, they tend to be no more than about 30 or 35 kids. But everything else, in terms of intro-level courses, are huge, but not here at Florida Poly. This is typical lab. They have amazing laboratories. It's not just your typical biology and chemistry and physics lab. It goes way beyond that, supercomputers and cybersecurity. Their digital library was actually featured on Jeopardy. There are no books in the library. Everything is digital. And they have only 2 colleges, and there's their College of Engineering. I have no idea what things like, you know, I don't know, electrodynamics and geometric dimensioning and tolerancing and nanotechnology are, but our kids often know what these things are. And this is their innovation and technology, you know, list of majors, you know, as well. These majors were actually developed in conjunction with industry experts, not just by academics. It is an amazing place to learn. Think about it, State University, relatively inexpensive. Still expensive, I mean, $20,000 a year for most of our state universities, room, board, books, fees, tuition, although probably all their books are online as well. But the classes are really small, and it's a wonderful interactive learning environment. Just like I can make eye contact with each and every one of you in here. That's what happens there.
So how many kids are in that university?
Pardon me?
How many kids totally are in that?
There's about 800 students there now.
Almost as much as-
Okay, so bridge and transition programs. Many of our state universities have, I think, did I finish all of this? Yeah. Okay, Florida. So many of our state universities have sort of back doors in. Often they're not, you can't apply to them, but you are selected for them. And so I've listed those that, you know, that are more popular. They often involve coming in the summer. Some are conditional, like if you do well in the summer, you automatically get to stay for fall. And you can have your guidance counselor call and recommend you for one, but you can't apply. But it's nice to know that if you're slightly lower and there's a good reason for you to be at that university, that there is a way for you to be able to apply. Like for instance, if you want to do interior design at FSU, and you don't have the grades to get into FSU, and even as an interior designer, you still need the grades, you need the curriculum and the scores, maybe you get in the back door. And then you could go into an interior design major. Anyway, you know, just to finish up, your kids have just one opportunity to shine. You have Carpe Diem, seize the day. And I have plenty of webinars that I do that are on our website on Score at the Top. If you just go to scoreathethetop.com and scroll down to the bottom of the home screen, there's a link for webinars. So this is actually the State University System webinars on there, SAT versus ACT, the new SAT, selective college admissions. And just want to thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to answer, you know, questions, and I'll stay privately, you know, afterwards for anyone who might have a more personal question, but any